Welcome to episode number 2 of the Proactive Planner, a practical podcast for people ready to take action today to live a more worry-free life. Avoid an accidental legacy and be a proactive planner today.
And now for the disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be, nor is it legal advice. By listening to this podcast, no attorney-client relationship is created between the speaker or the listener, nor is anything said on this podcast confidential. To have an attorney-client relationship, listeners must engage the law firm of Wilson Legal by signing an engagement letter and making an investment. Names of persons referenced on this podcast have been changed unless the name refers to an author, historical or public figure, or a family member, I guess, because I said a name in the last podcast.
Yep.
And by the way, all rights are reserved. If you do want to use the material you hear on this podcast for your own company, HOA group, or other community group, you're welcome to give us a call, and we'd be happy to license it to you.
Well, that is a mouthful, but when you work with an estate planning attorney, you have to. So welcome to episode number 2. Today we're talking about 3 things not to do when someone dies.
Right.
And then 3 things to do when someone dies. And I'm wearing pink today because it's kind of a Debbie Downer story, and so this brightens it up.
Well, Debbie Downer story, or just what you need when you need it, Jeff, because I know
Amen.
Everybody else in January is usually looking at the news resolutions that they made maybe a few days ago. And they're thinking about either how they're going to probably not make it to the end of the month, or they have already had to stop for some reason, or they forgot, right, on that New Year's resolution. But new beginnings is usually the focus.
It is.
But, a lot of people don't really realize that January is actually the month when the most people in the United States actually pass away.
In January.
In January. The highest month after January is March.
So why is it? Okay, why?
Well, in the winter months, so the way the U.S. divides up how people die is seasonally or not seasonally. Okay. So there's the winter season, the summer season, and not seasonal deaths. So the not seasonal is the really depressing ones, like the homicides, the infant mortality rates, that kind of thing, and suicide. The seasonal ones are things like 6% chance of death in the summertime and 64% chance in December through March, because we're all closer together. The flu's running around. I mean, your kids have probably been sick.
Yes.
Right? My kid's been sick, and my kid always gives me whatever she has.
Yes.
Same at your house, right? And so we're all close together, and we're all more susceptible to catching those viruses that are flying around. And I personally have a theory, and I don't know that there's research behind this, but I feel like that a lot of my older clients really look forward to seeing their family. And if they're at the age where they're kind of done living, once they've had that last family gathering, they really just don't have as much of a will to live.
Wow.
And that's why I think we see a lot more deaths in January.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So 60% for the winter months based on that. And in the summer months, it's based on summer vacation. We're driving, we're flying. Where we live, we have a really big lake behind us.
Yes, we do.
And
a very dangerous lake.
There's always 1 to 3 people who drown because they drank too much or were walking around at night and didn't realize there was a big lake there.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that happens every year. But unfortunately, when it's summer months, we have a lot more people swimming, and there just are some people that don't wear life jackets and don't use boater safety.
Yeah.
So Anyway, so that's kind of why we're talking about it today, because we want our listeners to be prepared when they get that phone call from a family member saying, Aunt June died, right? Because if the ones who are listening are the planners, which I hope you are, you are always going to have somebody in your family who is not a planner. And guess who they're calling when someone passes away? It's you, because you're supposed to know what to do.
No, I'm not the planner.
Oh, you're not the planner. Okay.
I'm the one making the phone calls.
Maybe it's your wife.
Yeah, no, actually, she's not the planner either. We're calling my brother-in-law. He's the planner.
There you go.
Yep.
So what we're going to start out with here is 3 things not to do when someone dies. So if you think about it, when someone dies, one of the first things people do, and it's almost a knee-jerk reaction, is they think they have to call everyone and let everyone know. And one of the first people or places on their list is the bank. Well, I'm going to tell you guys today, don't call the bank. That's number 1. And you might look at me kind of oddly, Michelle, why are we not calling the bank?
Yeah,
right?
Why?
And that's because Every one of us, if we're not on Medicare, we have a health insurance policy, right? And we pay our health insurance premiums once a month, and that gives us coverage for the whole month, right? Well, there aren't a lot of people that die exactly on the 30th. And so there's going to be some portion of that premium that is not used. And one of the things every single person's going to get back after a death is that check for some weird little amount, like $54.72. Well, nobody wants to open up a probate case just to deposit a check for $54. So one of the things that our listeners could do if that happens is instead of telling the bank, you wait for that check to come in, you put for deposit only on the back and drop it in the night drop of the bank. And then the bank will process that check and put it in, Aunt June's bank account the next morning. And you can know that you're not going to have to open up a probate case just for that check.
Wow.
So that's why you don't do that.
That's smart. That's smart. I will not be calling my bank.
If you do call your bank, they will freeze the account and then you can't do anything and you do have to go through probate to deposit that check.
That's such a pain.
Nobody wants that.
No.
All right. So the second thing you want to make sure you don't do when someone dies is you don't want to actually pay your credit cards. I know a lot of people they have habits and they pay their credit cards every month. And that's a big, important priority for them. And especially for older parents, their kids definitely know mom and dad believe in paying off that credit card every month. And they've done it for 20 years, exactly like that. So if mom and dad pass away, kids think, oh, we need to pay off the credit card, right? That's what we got to do for mom. Well, what you don't know is when you die, credit cards are the bottom of a list of priorities in our state statute for payment. If there's no money left, they actually don't get anything at all.
Okay.
So even if they're calling and saying, hey, we'll give you 10% off if you pay off your credit card today, don't do it. You just tell them Aunt June passed away. And so we're going to file with probate court. And once we have somebody appointed, then we'll give you a call and let you know if there's money left over for you.
Wow.
But credit cards should not get paid. And there's at least one credit card I know of that actually came to us on an estate a year after we finished probating the estate. So everything had been paid. Beneficiaries had gotten all their money. We had closed it with the probate court. And they said that the decedent, the person who died, owed $1,400 on this credit card. And I said, you have no idea what this family has gone through. Are you going to push this through court again? And they looked at me and they said, what, the person who had the account died? And I said, yeah, they passed away several years ago. We've already gone through probate on this. Oh, well, we don't go after dead people.
Okay.
So there is at least one credit card company out there that does not, at least at the time, a couple years ago, did not pursue collecting if the person had passed away.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
So number 1, do not call the bank.
Right.
Number 2, don't pay the credit cards. I'm liking this one.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
You're probably going to like the next one too. The third one is do not leave your house unlocked.
Wow. Okay.
Right?
That's a big one.
And when I say unlocked, I mean where a lot of family members have keys.
Okay.
Right? Accessible.
Yeah.
When someone passes away, especially if you've got people who tend to come over to mom and dad's house and might take some things, you really want to lock that front door so that we keep everything mom or dad had when they passed in place to be distributed in an organized way after somebody's appointed as executor.
Nobody in my family, but I have heard a story about something that's very similar to this. They got in, they got a whole bunch of stuff, sold it off, there it goes.
Well, and the problem with proving that they stole it is a lot of times right before somebody passes away, you don't go into someone's house and take pictures of everything in every room,
No, of
right?
course
That
not.
would be weird.
Yeah.
It actually would be a really good idea though.
It's smart.
Right?
It's smart but weird, yes.
Smart but weird. So we don't often have photos of what each room looked like right before somebody passed away. So there's no evidence I could put in front of a judge to say, hey, these were on the wall on this date because we took the pictures then, right? Now, here's something that you can do though, if you don't want to change the locks on the house, because that's one thing you can do is just change the locks, put a camera up, maybe a Ring doorbell, something like that. The other thing you can do, and this will make your homeowner's insurance company happy, or it should anyway, is you can take pictures once a year of all the rooms in your home. And I would actually open up the doors to the china cabinet and take pictures of what's inside of your cabinets as well, right? So that if you ever have a house fire, you have documented evidence of what you owned.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we do if we have a fire or damage is we don't remember all the little things we owned. And so we actually never get everything replaced, right? So do yourself a favor on the homeowner's insurance side, make sure you've got pictures, right? But then you can also use those same photos to say, as of 6 months ago or as of 8 months ago, Aunt June had 9 figurines on the shelf. You can see them right here, right? There was a story I had. It was a girlfriend-boyfriend story or fiance story. They weren't married. They'd been together for 3 years. The fiance passed away. The woman passed away. And she was a competitive fisherwoman.
Competitive fisherwoman?
Is that the right word? Fisherwoman?
I think they're just called fishermen.
Fisherman?
Fishermen.
So she had this upstairs bonus room, and she had 10 competitive competition fishing poles along the wall, and they all had the little like flag little post that you screw into the wall. Well, during her funeral, there was someone in her family who went into her house and stole all those fishing poles, and they were not there when they got done with the service. During the funeral,
that's
Jeff.
so dirty.
So
now, now I have heard stories of, burglaries happening because people post in the newspaper that they've passed on. People that are not so nice people in the world look at those things and then go and try to break into
it's
those
an
homes.
Opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another reason why you should leave your house locked.
Leave your house locked, maybe change the locks, because who knows how many people have keys. It could be the dog walker has a key, the housekeeper has a key, the lawn mowing guy has a key, the cousin has a key. Caregivers might have keys, and caregivers oftentimes can be tempted to go and, take some things, because especially if they're family caregivers, there are a lot of families out there, Jeff, that believe that you do for family. If you could do for family, you don't ask for payment, right? You just do it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
I believe in paying people for what they do, especially if they're spending hours per day caring for someone. Well, in those counties or those families where people have family members caring for them and they're not being paid, they feel like they're owed something for the work and the commitment they gave for years, usually. But there's actually no statute that says, oh, because you cared for Aunt June for 6 years, you get $25 an hour. Show us your logbook of time where it's time to compensate you. That doesn't happen. So they feel gypped a lot of times when Aunt June passes and now they're not going to get paid, right? Excuse me. So, just being able to prevent that kind of thing from happening is a good thing, I think, because it's going to help preserve family harmony. But if you've got families out there who have caregivers, they need to be paid. We need to compensate our family members for the work that they do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So let's review.
Yes.
3 things not to do when someone dies. Number 1, do not call the bank. Number 2, do not pay the credit cards. My personal favorite. Number 3, do not leave the house unlocked. Keep it locked. Get a Ring camera. Take photos. Do what you got to do. So what are the 3 things then to do when someone dies?
Well, the first thing you want to do is probably work on making funeral arrangements, right?
Okay.
And a lot of people, the question that happens around that is, where do I get the money to pay for the funeral? There are some folks out there who will put the name of the person who's going to be in charge of setting up the funeral on the bank account with the money in it for the funeral. That makes it easy because when, let's say, Aunt June and she has a niece, Abigail, who's on the account with her. Well, Abby and June are on the account. They're co-owners. When June passes, now Abby owns that account, and Abby can use those funds to pay for the funeral directly.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
There's pluses and minuses to that, because what if Abby files bankruptcy? Well, now Aunt June's $10,000 in that account is going to be part of Abby's bankruptcy. So probably not the best idea, but it works and people do it that way. Another way to do it is some folks have an insurance policy for burial, especially if they don't know what state they'll be living in when they pass away, and they might change their mind about where they want to be buried, right? So an insurance policy works. Even a life insurance policy works. The funeral home they'll basically put a claim on the life insurance policy for the amount of the funeral, and they get paid first. And then the rest of the death benefit goes to the beneficiaries, right? Another way to do it, and this is not your personal favorite, I'm sure it won't be, is you pay for it out of your own pocket, or all the kids split it, right? And inevitably when that happens, you have at least one kid who says, well, I don't have the cash. I'm sorry, I can't help out.
Right, of course.
Right? And it ends up landing all on one person or all on like a few people, but not everybody. Well, the one thing that you can do is get reimbursed from the estate as long as Aunt June owned something that had value that could be sold to equal or exceed that value of the funeral. You'll be paid back. You'll just have to wait a little while to get paid back. So you don't have to go in your car to every ATM and try to get $200 out the night that she passes away, which is what one family of mine did, actually.
Wow.
And this was back when ATMs had a $200 a day limit, right? They hit 10 ATMs in 2 hours.
That's like a robbery. Oy.
Because they were all panicking they wouldn't have enough money. And here's the last thing that you can do, and it's not something everybody likes to do, especially if it burials what you want. And for some religions, it's not going to work. But you can leave the body at the morgue until the probate case is opened and the executor is appointed. And, we have cash. Either the house gets sold and now we have cash from the house sale, or we have access to a bank account that used to be in Aunt June's name that we can use.
Okay.
With cremation, it's easier because it's the cremated remains. And it's also easier a lot of times for families to postpone a funeral service because it allows people to plan for travel, right? And do it at a convenient time when they're not having to take as much time off from work.
Okay. What's
so
next?
that is the first thing to do. The second thing to do is to figure out what the decedent owned. So I'm using the word decedent here. And I know it probably sounds kind of like a word you might have used in third grade math class, like antecedent, maybe English class.
Nope.
So all decedent means is it's the person who passed away, right? So when we say decedent, we're talking about the person who passed away. So why are we trying to figure out what the person owned? Well, we want to figure out what the person owned because we want to know if we have to go through the probate court process of appointing an executor. If there's nothing that needs title change to it, you don't have to go through probate. And I just had a lady come to a library workshop a couple months ago. She had started probate, and she and the probate judge have been going round and round about her paperwork because she's never doing it right. And I asked her what was in the estate because the probate court wanted to get the annual return, which is the piece of paper that says this is the income we had come in, this is what we distributed, right, for the year. And before we did that, we wanted to check the inventory and just make sure we knew what was in the estate in the first place. Well, this gentleman owned 2 golf memberships, some clothing, and I think the car was jointly owned. So she just moved that over to her name and all the bank accounts were jointly owned. That was it. Ugh. And she had gone through probate and didn't have to. And here's the kicker. She had met with 2 other attorneys before finding me who helped her with the probate process and didn't even bother to check what her husband owned when he passed away.
Wow.
And what would even need to be transferred. Her property was jointly titled. What a waste of time.
Yeah.
She can hardly see. She has to drive in daylight and it can't be raining. So, you can imagine that.
Well,
it's
hard to rain. It's hard to drive in the rain.
It is hard to drive in the rain. That's true. But I just felt really bad for this woman who had already spent probably a couple $1,000s talking with 2 other attorneys. And the first thing they asked was not, what did your husband own?
That's
right.
That seems criminal.
So, right. So if you have somebody who passes away and you get a call, so for all of our listeners, if the attorney you meet with does not start out with, let's find out what he owned or she owned, you need to get another attorney. You either are finding somebody who's too cheap or too inexperienced because all they're focused on is how to begin the process, not, hey, do we even need to do this at all? Right? So things that you want to look for are houses. If a house has ownership just in one surviving spouse, so mom and dad had the house and now the second parent has passed away, we don't have anybody who owns it now. We got to transfer it. We need 1, probably 2 people who can sign on behalf of mom and on behalf of dad. And here's the tricky part. People do that a lot. So mom and dad own a house. Let's say it's not joint. Dad passes away first. The kids don't bother doing anything because mom will still live there. When mom passes away, now we have to file probate twice.
Ugh.
And because mom was alive when dad passed away, we have to file mom's probate estate first because her executor has to be listed as an heir in dad's probate petition.
Okay.
So it's twice as long because you got to wait for the first one to go through and then the second one before you can actually list a property for sale.
Wow.
But I digress a little bit. So deeds are a biggie, right? If you've got property in Georgia or in another state, you're going to have to go through probate. If you have property in another state, you get to go through probate twice. Once in Georgia, once in the other state.
Very exciting for no one.
Great way to spend lots of extra money.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure the judges love it.
Cars, you can usually transfer just by going to the DMV office if the will says who gets it. If the will does not say who gets the car, then you have to go through probate if
Which
it's not jointly owned.
In some states is worse than probate.
The DMV office?
Oh, yeah.
Can be.
Not here in Forsyth County. It's
Can be.
Awesome. Super quick, easy. Fulton County, disaster.
As long as you have what you need when you go in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like Home Depot. You got to go more than once before you finish your project. All right. So things like bank accounts that don't have a living beneficiary or life insurance that does not have a living beneficiary. So for those in our audience who have just been home to visit family over the holidays, One thing to remind mom and dad to do is if one parent has passed away, let's update your beneficiaries, mom, if you survived, dad, and let's make sure the kids are listed, right? At minimum. That's something everybody could do today. And that way they can avoid probate on those accounts.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
All right. So we're looking for things that are owned. And then the third thing you're going to do after somebody passes away is you need to find the names, addresses, phone numbers, and emails, or at least the name and address for everybody who is an heir of the person who died. HEIR. That means a blood relative who is next in line to inherit.
Which would be children, typically.
Children. Yep. If you're a parent, so it'd be your kids. And then once they're grown, it'd be your grandkids, right? But what if you had no kids and no grandkids? Who would be the next person, do you think?
Siblings?
Nope, that's not the next person.
Who?
Who's the next person?
My wife?
Parents.
Oh, parents. Oh,
Your
okay.
wife is
okay.
not a blood relative, or at least she shouldn't be. If you're in Forsyth County and she's a blood relative, that could be a problem.
No, she's not, I promise. That just got weird.
But no, so if you remember back in the 90s, it was really popular for people to find out how many friends it took for them to be linked to Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon, yeah, of
And it was
course.
the 7 degrees
Yeah,
connection
yeah.
or 6 degrees or something from
Yep.
Kevin Bacon game.
Yep.
And we basically figured out all of us are connected to Kevin Bacon within 6 degrees or 6 friendships.
Yep.
So in life, you either have people in your downline, like Amway, right? Your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids,
Right.
or you have people in your upline.
Okay.
And that's your parents first. They're within 1 degree. And then siblings, 2 degrees. And then nieces and nephews are 3 degrees. And first cousins are 4 degrees.
Wow.
And so believe it or not, if you die leaving no one, it's going to be whoever's living in that lineup that gets your estate. So if you're listening and you're thinking about the people in that lineup and you're making a yucky face, then you probably need to do some estate planning to make sure that the people in your family you don't want to have your stuff don't ever get it.
Yep.
But they still need to get notice, whether you like them or not. We have to give them notice. And that includes, by the way, Jeff, half siblings.
Okay.
And that means even if you don't know who they are, have never heard of them, don't know their name or where they live, half siblings.
Wow.
And we found one last year on an estate.
Wow.
And here was the unlucky part. The poor guy who thought he was the only son and got everything only got half because of this half sibling that appeared
Out of nowhere.
out of nowhere.
Oh, man.
And we're required to look for them, right? The probate court requires us to list them. And if we don't know where they are, we have to look for them. Like I have to hire a private investigator and pay $300
Wow.
to have them look for those people before I can have it published in the newspaper.
Now, again, you can circumvent that situation by doing proper estate planning.
Absolutely. Yes.
There you go. Okay,
We're
good.
also here to help people avoid the accidental legacy, right? So the oops, I didn't have a plan and this is what's now going to happen. Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of half siblings in the world today.
Yes, there are.
So that's a big one. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably an episode in and of itself.
Yes, it can be. And you know that test that people are doing now, the 23andMe or 20,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are people finding half siblings by getting their DNA put in that system.
Wow. Yeah, because it goes into a system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And they match you up.
I'm not going into that system. Government's taking that system. I'm just kidding.
So you'll notice too, in that list of the 3 things to do, I didn't say call your lawyer.
Yeah.
You don't have to call your lawyer first. You can, but you don't have to. So here's what we do in that first conversation, because I'm going to tell you the reason I chose this topic for this month is we've had 3 people pass away in the last 4 weeks. Clients.
Wow.
One of them unexpectedly.
Okay.
So I've had 3 families call me in a panic, right? What do we do now? Like, especially for the one that was unexpected. She was working on her mom's estate. We had unclaimed funds in Arkansas we were chasing down, right? We had a plan. We were working the plan. And she was the cog that kind of kept everything together. And they came in and we had to sit down and talk about everything we had worked on with her that now her daughter and son are going to need to take over, right? But basically that first conversation, if you call me before the death certificate, the first conversation we have is going to be the 3 things we just talked about that you need to do.
Right.
We need to know what property the person who died had. We need to know who their family is. And we need to know, and I'm forgetting the funeral arrangements. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have any issues getting funeral arrangements set up? And I will tell you guys, because this actually happened in my family. My dad had this guy who always helped him on projects. We've been doing landlord-tenant rentals for 40 years. And whenever you rent property, you know, with houses, there's always something that needs to be fixed. And so this fella just lived in one of the trailers behind my parents' house. And he would go help dad on projects, but he didn't have any family. And when he died, we didn't want to have to go through probate. He only had one bank account with like $1,300 in it. What the bank can do in cases like that is the bank can actually transfer that $1,300 to the funeral home using a form if the funds are not claimed within 90 days. And here's the other thing, creditors can come after that money too, right? But if you're a friend of somebody and you don't want to get knee deep involved in a probate case because there's not much money there, just have the bank use that form after 90 days to send it to the funeral home.
Okay. Well, that's great information.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Anyway, but that's what we have for today.
Okay.
You can call your attorney once the death certificate comes in. I'm getting tongue-tied.
And the attorney should be you.
Oh, of course.
Michelle
We're a little
Wilson.
biased.
Wilson Legal.
But, you know, even if it's not me, the important thing is to hire somebody who knows what they're doing, because you can spend an awful lot of time spinning your wheels and wasting time and money if you don't. And that's the thing that's most important to me. If you call me and you're from, let's say, South Georgia, and we are not going to take the probate case down there, we're going to help connect you to somebody who can take that case that we would trust. I've got classmates from law school that I would trust to handle that case for you.
That's great. That's great. So you should be the first step in their battle with probate.
There you go.
Because it pretty much is a battle with probate. All right. So how can people find you?
So the best way to contact us is either by calling us at 770-205-7861 or emailing us at info@wilson-legal.com.
And of course, your website is wilson-legal.com or hyphen,
correct.
whichever way you say it. Michelle, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Till next time.
Indeed.